Do you struggle to mount your horse? Are they always fidgeting or walking off? Maybe you can't even get them near the mounting block. If this sounds like you and your horse, then you should watch this step-by-step video showing how to make mounting easy using clicker training. Firstly, if you haven't already watched our clicker training video on parking your horse, then go back and watch that first, then come back to this video. That exercise builds the foundations for what we'll be working on to make mounting easier for you. Those steps in that video should be done first so that you're ready to continue with the steps in this video. I think I should be clear when I say, please make sure there's no underlying issues causing your horse to not want to be mounted. These could be a number of things, but the most obvious is to check that your saddle fits correctly, their back has been checked, their teeth have been done, all that sort of stuff. If your problems persist, then you may need to investigate further. Just remember, horses aren't naughty for no reason. If your horse is resisting something, then there's likely an issue somewhere. Unless you have a full vet check with x-rays and stuff, you can never say for sure that their behaviour is not pain related. So just bear that in mind. If it is simply a behavioural issue or a learnt behaviour, then these steps will help you to be able to fix your horse's mounting issue. Depending on the severity of the issue you're having, you should aim to repeat these steps over a few sessions, keeping them short and positive. If at any stage you start having issues, you need to go back a step and repeat it until the horse is happy again. Then you can continue. Step 1. The first step that I introduce is getting the horse to approach the block calmly and stand still. If you need to do this first from a distance, then that's fine. The aim is to make sure your horse stands still and doesn't swing their quarters out, which is a common issue when it comes to mounting. At each stage, click and reward your horse for standing calmly. Don't forget to feed away from you so your horse doesn't start getting muggy and trying to get in your pockets. Once your horse can do this, move closer and closer to your mounting block until they're at a distance that you could technically get on, remembering to reward each effort. You might need to walk in front of the horse depending on the way your mounting block's placed, so make sure to practice this too, and be aware that changing your position may mean the horse goes back a step or two, and you might have to repeat it in the new position. Step 2. Once your horse will happily stand next to the block, with you either in front or to the side of them as you normally would, I would then test my horse's ability to stand still whilst I move around them. Now this is where the steps from the previous video come in. If your horse already knows this exercise, then it's obviously going to make it easier for you. Just be aware that because you're now doing it in a different environment, you'll likely need to recap from the first steps again. This is called a context shift. You've changed the context of the exercise, so to the horse it's a new exercise with new distractions and in a new area. But the fact that they have the basics in there already, they will pick it up quicker than one that's just learning it from scratch. So I would start by just rocking my weight back a little bit with a click and reward for them standing still, then taking one step back, click and reward, and so on, like we did in the previous video. Notice how I'm not yet getting on the mounting block because we're not quite at that stage yet. I want to make sure that my horse isn't going to move at any moment with me on the ground first. Now, don't worry if this is all you get up to on your first session. If it takes you 15-20 minutes to get to here, then that's fine, but leave your session there so you don't frustrate your horse. They might not be doing any physical work, but it will be very mentally stimulating for them, and it will exhaust them if you keep pushing and pushing. Try to remember to end on a jackpot moment too, so give your horse either a bigger reward or a higher value reward on your last one, and then take them home, whether that's the stable or the field, whatever. This can just help to mark the end of the session, as well as giving them a nice enjoyable moment within the last exercise. Come back the next day or the next session and repeat those steps again. You should find that you get to that end step quicker. If not, don't worry about it, maybe leave it there again and return the next day or the next session. Remember, you're building the foundations for a behaviour that you want to last, so taking the necessary steps and being patient with the progress is really important. Step 3. The mounting block. Once you feel you're ready to progress to the next step, whether that's the next day or a week after, it's entirely up to you to decide and to listen to what your horse needs. In your session, repeat step 1 and 2 as normal. Once you're happy your horse knows what's going on and the exercise that you're going to be doing, add in stepping up onto just one step. You still want your horse to stand still, but with the foundations you've been building in step 2, that shouldn't be too difficult for them to comprehend. When you first start, keep the duration short. Don't stand there for 30 seconds and wonder why they're getting restless. To start with, aim to get up on the step and stand for about 1 second, click, come back down and reward. The reason we want to come back down and reward is we want to keep their head in a neutral position or to the outside. If you treat them whilst you're still standing on the block or to the inside, you risk them swinging their quarters out in order for them to get to the treat, which is obviously something we don't want to encourage. So treating them in that neutral state means they know they don't need to move to get their reward and that it's coming to them. Each time you can increase the duration slightly, but don't go too mad in the first session. As before, if this is all you get up to on the next session, then that's fine. It really is dependent on your horse and how much of an issue that they have. Build things up gradually as your horse needs to. When you feel ready, progressively build up to the next step and repeat. If you have a big horse and have extra steps, then repeat as necessary until you get up to the height that you need, remembering to come down and treat each time. Once you're happy that you can walk all the way up and down the block without your horse moving or becoming tense, then you're ready for the next step. Step 4. Instead of just jumping on, I like to break this bit into small sections too, especially for those that have real issues. I start almost like I would with a horse that's been sat on for the first time. Repeat the previous steps, then once up to the top step, just lean across your horse briefly. Again, we don't want them to move. As soon as you have leant across them and they've stayed still, you can click and reward. Remember to go back down the block and treat at the front. Do this a few times until your horse is comfortable. Some may not be bothered in the slightest and you can move on quite quickly, but some others may need a few goes to become comfortable and then to keep still. Once happy, I'd then move on to placing a foot in the stirrup with some weight. You want to lean forward slightly so you're not pulling the saddle to one side, and repeat as before, click and treat. If they move around, don't worry, just circle and start back with step 2. It's important that you don't click and treat if there is movement, as you'll be marking them moving as being what you wanted them to do and they'll get confused. The odd click at the wrong time isn't going to do any harm, but if you're continuously clicking at the wrong moment, then it's not going to benefit anybody. At this stage, I would still go back and do each step once whilst I'm teaching them. So I would bring them round to the mounting block, stand them next to it, click and reward. Then I'd walk up a couple of steps, click and reward, come back down. Then I'd lean over, click and come back down and reward. And then I'd put a foot in the stirrup and lean over, click and come back down and reward. You're still doing those first steps, just a little bit quicker. Assuming that they're good with that, then I would move on to the final step, which would be to actually get on. So regardless of your horse, you should always get on carefully. Don't thump down in your saddle or scramble on. Not only is it not nice for your horse, but it could undo all your hard work by making the last step unpleasant. Repeat the previous steps and gently mount. I always mount slowly, making sure to throw my right leg up as high as I can so that I know I'm not going to touch their croup and potentially frighten them. As soon as my bum's in the saddle, that's when I'll click and then reward. So this time you have to reward from on top of them. I usually ask them to bend round to the right to start with, as if they do swing the quarters round, they'll actually be moving closer to the block. Once they know how to get the treat and stay still, you can do it from either side, and to be honest, it's quite good to vary it so they don't start anticipating where it's coming from. If you can get your hand right in front of your horse so the head stays reasonably neutral, then you can do that as well. For the first time, I'd likely leave the session there. You've got on without any hassle, hopefully. Your horse has had a nice, enjoyable time. Don't ask them to work anymore. Just hop off and take them home again, whether that's the stable or the field. Next time, I'd likely get on and off a couple of times and maybe a gentle ride to finish. Remember, it might not be physical work, but your horse will still have used a lot of brain power in these early stages, and they'll really benefit from having a little rest until the next session. It really doesn't matter how long you stay at each stage through this. To be successful, you have to be absolutely sure your horse is ready for the next stage. Don't be too worried about coming back a step if you have to. The more you repeat something, the better the behaviour will get. So the longer you work on a specific step, the better it will be, and the easier the next step will be. Your horse's nature will make a big impact on how long it takes. If you've got a really easygoing, laid-back pony who isn't that difficult to mount but maybe has a couple of little issues, then you're likely going to progress quicker with this than someone who, for example, has a highly strung, nervous horse that's got a questionable history and has had a bad fitting saddle, who subsequently has a pain association with being mounted. Obviously that's going to take a lot longer, but it takes as long as it takes. Hopefully this will help those of you who dread the task of getting on your horse and make the mounting block a more enjoyable place for both you and your horse. Make sure to let us know how you get on.